Hi, Shannon.
Hi.
I'm really excited you're here. In fact, I recently met you and didn't know you'd been at Portland Fashion Week back in 2009. So that's pretty amazing that now today, years later, you're back here. You're here to visit on site. So, I wanted to start up on top with you because this is the headlands, right? This is where creeks and rivers begin. Pretty much everything you can see in the near horizon here is us. So we're really a nice island. It's about 50 square miles of one contiguous piece. My husband has done an amazing job of managing landscape and the interconnected relationships of grazing animals and land. And in fact, grasses like these and grazing animals evolved together on the planet. So grazing animals are really important to the health of our watersheds, which means our soil and grasses, air, clean water. It's really vital. So Dan has always been a keen observer, and his top of mind thing has always been the health of the resource. So since the late 80s here, he has worked early on with our agency partners to put into place a total conservation management plan for this entire operation that would maximize the resource. Maximizing the resource to him means keeping it as vital as possible, because instinctively we know that the healthier the land, the healthier the harvest, and therefore the healthier your bottom line. Not only that, it makes for positive impacts on family, community, region, nation, planet. I mean, it just starts here and goes all the way out. What I thought I would do is just tell you briefly what we've done here since the 80s, but even kind of throughout this ranch's history, because it was a sheep operation on a very large scale historically with herders. So they moved across the landscape, hitting it, grazing it, moving on. And that makes for, that's the replica way of nature to graze lands anyway. So he did two primary things, two different components in our management of this place. There's grazing lands and there's croplands. We're here in the winter. I can't believe you're out here. This is not spring, summer when everything's green. And in fact, you should come back in the spring when this high desert, semi-arid country just explodes with green growth and the grasses just take off. It's amazing. But we're looking at grasslands here that are native bunch grass that have been grazed domestically. This is we're starting our 147th year of continuous operation of the Imperial Stock Ranch. So the domestic livestock and wildlife graze these grass plants. And what Dan did was put in a broad-based rotational grazing system so that all our domestic livestock is moved across and control the timing and the duration of the grazing. How much rest and replenish there is for the plants. So rotational grazing meant building fences, because that was replacing the use of herders. It meant off-stream water developments up high so they don't have to walk for miles down to the creek. And it also means off-stream so they don't stay on the creek and graze the vegetation and expose the soil to erosion, right? And take away the canopy that shades and cools water. So off-stream, we've put in about over 100 off-stream water developments. Those are little sediment catch basins or dams in the uplands, as well as natural spring developments that protect, capture, hold, store water, create a giant sponge effect, and let the overflow go down onto the natural creeks. We also really are mindful of strategically placing their salt and mineral supplements to help control where they are. It's like chocolate. Wherever you put the chocolate, they will go. So we fence, we do off-stream water developments, we time their rotational grazing. We graze 12 months here. So we don't feed. They just live on what nature provides 12 months a year, and the strategic placement of minerals. So those four things totally changed the whole grazing approach here. We have thousands of acres of cropland. And this is dry land farming country. So when the settlers came west, they were going to feed a growing nation. We don't pump or have irrigation here, and we have 8 to 10 inches of rainfall a year. Every drop is precious. And so he began to see that the summer fallow method of farming, which you get a crop one year and the next year it's fallow, which means you don't crop. So then the invader species come in. Invader species will cover bare ground because Mother Nature doesn't like bare ground. So if you leave it bare, you get the species. So then you have to fight the weeds. So you make trips over the field, disking it, and then harrowing it, and then, you know, picking rocks, because every time you go over it, you bring up rocks. So the idea that Dan had was, we're not going to do it this way anymore. We're going to do it the way Mother Nature does it. We're going to put our seed in the ground, and when the crop comes to maturity, we will harvest. And then we're going to leave all that residue on the field. We're not going to disc it and do this and do that and do that. And actually we turn our livestock in on those crop fields after harvest, and they eat the mist heads and the chaff dunce, and they walk down that stubble and they naturally fertilize, and they prepare the seed bed, and then we come in with the drill and put the seed in the ground, and that's it until we come back and harvest the crop. And so it's reduced our trips over the field by 5, which is a significant reduction in fossil fuel use. The soil is mellower. We've retained all the organic matter. We're building soil instead of losing it. We are getting a crop every year. We're annual cropping. And so there's no bare ground. We've reduced or eliminated erosion entirely. And we've increased our ability with those growing plants to draw carbon down. We now get the same yield every year we used to get every other, so we've doubled our harvest. It's just been an incredible win. Right. The experts tell us that for every acre that you put into no-till, you capture 100 pounds of carbon per year per acre. So if you have 5,000 acres, that's 500,000 pounds of carbon just on the cropland. And then you have tens of thousands of acres of grazing land here, which the grazing animals are, by plan, intentionally biting those grasses, stimulating the root development, stimulating seed head production, increasing biomass above and below ground. We're vitalizing plants with grazing animals the way the Creator intended. And so the regrowth of those plants that are grazed also draws down carbon. On the whole, it's a tremendous impact. The indicator species here in the Northwest that we all know is salmon. In 1990, we only had 2. Stay off, good girl. We only had 2 salmon come home. 20 years later and since, with the mindset changes and practices Dan has implemented here, and also our neighbors as part of a comprehensive Buck Hollow project. Sadie, you are so impatient. Just a minute. All right, stay off. Good dog. Anyway, we've seen record numbers of salmon return to Buck Hollow, which was beyond our hopes and dreams in our lifetime, but it's testimony to observation, creative thinking, changing our mindsets, and evolving our practices. Okay, look, let me see. How about this? How about that? Right here, come here. So the first settler here, the story begins actually in 1852 on the Oregon Trail in a wagon train. A family named Hinton had a son on the way west, and they named him Richard Hinton. Richard grew up in the Willamette Valley, seeing it overcrowded, fenced, plowed under, and he had a dream of being a stockman, not a farmer. And he came east of the mountains to this Columbia Plateau, so he filed on his first 160 acres, and we're standing in it. By 1900, he was the largest owner of livestock and land in Wasco County, and by shortly after that, in the early 1900s, prior to 1905, he gained the status of being the largest individual owner of livestock and land in the state of Oregon. running one of the biggest sheep empires in the American West, tens of thousands of head of sheep. And of course, we're looking at the historic Hinton House. This was the showpiece of his empire, a 3-story Queen Anne colonial. We restored it to original in 1993, and the entire ranch headquarters went on the National Register of Historic Places. It's the only ranch in Oregon with this designation that is still operating. Everything we're going to go into now, pre-engines, pre-industrial equipment. And we're still utilizing these facilities. This is, you know, century plus of planning, building, and practical use, right? It's serving so many generations. You can't live here and work here and not be in awe of what you've had the opportunity to live, or not recognize that you're temporary, right? We're temporary stewards. And you have to take that, I mean, you take it to heart. You can't help but take it to heart. Obviously, these saddles are amazing. They did the work, they created an empire, and then they outlived their era, really. Dan's favorite artifact, but this is Blitz. 1 gallon.
A gallon?
Honey, I'm only gonna have 1 beer. Bring me a beer, I'm only gonna have 1.
Just one for me.
Yeah, when men were men, huh? Ah, this is a great facility. The shearing shed. We sheared here in this building consecutively at least 120 years.
Wow.
So the sheep would come from the north and come in here. If you've ever worked livestock and you know if a gate swings all the way, they can get by. You got to get around them and bring them back to put them in this pen. But this is designed so that the scale is that every pen, the door cannot swing all the way. It's blocked by the alley. So there's no chance that you have a wreck. Really, we don't know shearing that is anything other than really good for the animal. We just don't know any other experience. These people are really good. We trust them. And our family is here as the crew.
Yep.
This is our skirting table. So the fleece comes off the sheep in about 3 to 4 minutes in one piece. We're right there to pull it, pick it up, come over here and toss it, and it opens up onto this table in one piece. And now we move around it looking for anything that should be removed. We also have a grader here. And so they're pulling samples really quick, and they're doing a visual test, not a core sample, which happens later, but a visual test of the quality of the fiber, the micron. It's classed, and we toss it A-line, A1, A2, shortened tenders. And so that all happens right here. And then we have a hydraulic baler where it's baled and it's ready for commercial shipment to the processing facility. That's new since about '08. Before that, we did it the old way. You would roll up the fleece and toss it up here. This is timeless, much like the rest of our life. Food, clothing, and shelter. Food, clothing, and shelter. So these forged iron rings by the blacksmith, right? You put the sack in, pull the top up, and the weight of the sack keeps this ring in place. Then you put the first half a dozen fleeces or so in, and then somebody goes into that bag, into the wool sack, and you start stomping it. Right? You got to pack the bag. So we just keep throwing the fleeces, and they just keep pounding it. And then when it's full, somebody sits on that board, and we leverage it up, and you sew it shut with those twines, stack it on the pallets, and it's ready to be loaded onto a wagon or so on. In 1999, we had sheared the wool in the spring, and we called up our longtime wool buyer. We got off the phone, and Dan said, "We can't sell the wool." I was like, "What do you mean we can't sell the wool? We've always sold the wool, right?" And he said, they're not going to buy. Well, there weren't any other buyers. Between 96 and 2000, in just a 4-year period, 26,000 sheep producers in America went out of business. How could we rid sheep from the Imperial Stock Ranch? How could you do that? And so right then, that day, he said, well, either we find our own markets for what sheep provide us, or they're gone off this ranch. that became my new challenge. How do you do it? So, you know, a lot of people over the years have talked to me about wanting to start a fiber mill or create a business plan or whatever, but it really is a huge challenge. And of course, besides getting it to yarn, you know, how are you going to get it knit to goods or woven to goods and the fabric finished and your cut and sew? So when we talk about building a fiber system, a regional system, all those things have to be given thought. Mainly, what is your market? Who is the customer? And who can we get to commit to scale in order to pull it through? We've seen it in food. We've been working on it in food. We know it in food that it's going to cost a little more, but how much more? What does research tell us people are willing to pay? We have the same issue in textiles. Talking about the difference between the product we can bring you in textiles versus what you saw in the store. I worked my way into employing pretty regularly about 20 local Oregon and Central Oregon textile artists. And our converted sunlight energy became these beautiful treasures. I'm never satisfied with one simple thing. You've got to start creating it into something. What's next? And so this became a cover catalog sweater for Norm Thompson. Okay, here's the skin, accenting the collar, antler buttons made here by the boys, antlers, shed antlers we pick up on the ranch when we're riding, moving cattle or sheep. And this is locally woven fabric into a vest accented with the collar. I sold and sold and sold by adding a little more value, creative thinking, and creating a product. These are all really early pieces. This is me learning what's possible with this miracle fiber from the skilled people around me. I reached out to some local Portland fashion designers I'd read about in probably Oregon Business Magazine. And the one who responded was Anna Cohen. And Anna and I got to know each other, and it led us into a relationship. And she actually worked for us from 2008 through about 2014. Anna brought a whole new level to us of design and really helped in the presentation of our product. And in this collection, what we really did was we built a supply chain. We did everything you would need to do to build an accessory and apparel collection. We did yarn spinning, yarn dyeing, fabric weaving, fabric dyeing, piece dyeing, cut and sew, garment dyeing in order to match various pieces in the collection to the color tones. We established relationships and connections to do all those things inside the United States and bring in a completely American collection at this quality and level to the market. Dan and I were not prepared to walk into a full fashion line. We just didn't have the skills, we didn't have the experience, and we could never threaten the resource, which is this ranch. And so we made a commitment to just grow yarn sales in the needle arts industry. We moved the Imperial yarn business into this building in 2011. We grew 700% in 18 months. Wow. So now we're rolling along, selling yarn, and I'm happy, everybody's content, and July of 2012 comes around, a year and a half after the mission to sell yarn, and I got a call from Ralph Lauren during the London Olympics, following this huge uproar over the Chinese-made uniforms. In August of 2012, a design team from Polo Ralph Lauren in New York came here. What an experience. Yeah. When they saw this yarn, they just held it. And thankfully, the people who came not only were great in design and experienced in their industry, but they had a heart for who we were. And I think the lead designer knew that day that we were the story. And so 6 months later, and we didn't know what this was. Right. 6 months later, we got a purchase order, the biggest purchase order you could have imagined. So it hadn't become real when they told us. Then they sent a film crew, and it still wasn't real until the Olympics came. Actually, I guess they launched their film October 29th of 2013. But when it really hit me was the day of the opening ceremonies, We were in lambing. We had snow on the ground, horrific temperatures, a battle like we all have. I'd come in from a chore round, and my nose was running. I was trying to load the stove, and the phone rang. I pick up the phone, and it's that lead designer from New York saying, "Jeannie, we just dressed the team, and they're headed to from the Olympic Village to the ceremony. And we're sending you photos. We wanted to share it with you and Dan. Thank you for being part of this." That's when it became real.
Yeah.
The visibility from the involvement with Ralph Lauren created hundreds, literally hundreds of inquiries to us for fiber, for yarns, for a relationship. And that's propelled our journey even faster forward, right? It continued to grow. And Patagonia began to visit here and look at us as a potential provider of wool to their programs. The interesting thing that developed is they required a third-party audit. They wanted a certified wool that it met a certain standard. Amazingly, the intent of the standards matched with our belief and philosophy on the ground here anyway. So everything we started talking about today, caring for land, looking at best practices, taking care of animals, fit within this standard. So we became a pilot audit site for a developing standard called the Responsible Wool Standard. It's voluntary, and it's based on land and animal care, best practices in land and animal care. And I'm proud to say that we became the first certified ranch, not only in the United States, but in the world under this new program, and that was announced last spring. We were growing so fast, and with, unfortunately, my husband's increasing health challenges, it was really important for me to focus close to home. And so in November of 2015, we had an opportunity to sell the Imperial Fiber, Imperial Yarn value-added business. And so we did. We sold the business in November of 2015. And from then forward, the Imperial Stock Ranch and the Imperial Yarn business are under completely separate ownership. So we carry on. We're in the process of transition to the next generation. The one thing I do know is our commitment to certified wool and to continuing to help lead that supply for those brands who want to source certified wool in America and make product in America. And we hope to continue to support strengthening America's family farms and ranches and American manufacturing, because we need that as part of our culture. So I'm able to confirm with Ralph Lauren's blessing that they chose the Imperial Stock Ranch American Merino Yarn Program provided by National Spinning Company, Inc. for both the opening and closing ceremony uniforms for Team USA for the Winter Olympics 2018 in Korea, which is a huge win for American fiber producers, wool producers, American manufacturing. I'm really excited that Ralph Lauren continues their American program. I'm excited for American fiber producers. Evidently, the closing ceremony uniforms, all the pieces that they use these yarns for, the knits, hat, mittens, and the sweater are 100% wool. And the opening ceremony uniforms, the hat is 100% wool, and the sweater is 70% wool, 30% American alpaca. So it's a big win for American fiber producers. And I'm sure we're all proud to be part of the Ralph Lauren Team USA program.